Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, we're being joined by Dallas Woodburn, author of The Best Week That Never Happened. Dallas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
Yes.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
My biggest piece of advice for a first-time author is to really try to guard your writing time like it's precious and schedule that time in your calendar just like you would any other appointment that you have. Your writing time is an appointment with your creative self and your subconscious. And I found this is my first published novel, but actually my fourth novel manuscript that I wrote, that the writing became easier and easier with each book if I really committed to writing every single day, even if that's only for 10 or 15 minutes, but keeping in that zone of creativity with the project, I think is so important at getting you from the first page all the way to that finish line.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Yeah, so on the flip side of that, I think that while we do have a lot of control over trying to schedule our writing time and we have control over the aspects of the creative process in writing our books and revising our books, when it comes to getting published, there is so much that is out of our control. And I think just really having patience with the journey and faith that your book will find its perfect publishing journey, whatever that may be, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing, and just really having that confidence and that belief in yourself that your book does have a important story to tell with the world. And I think that it can be hard sometimes to face discouragement and rejection. The path can be a long one, but when you can return to that faith in yourself and your message and knowing why your book is important and how it will touch people, I think that can help you overcome those hardships.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Yes. So my book, The Best Week That Never Happened, it debuted in April 2020. So it was right after the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And I had originally planned a bunch of in-person book events at various bookstores in my area. But when April came around, all of those bookstores were closed and were not having in-person events. So what I did was I organized a lot of virtual events. And in particular, I did a virtual book launch. And you know what, Paul? It was so much fun that I think even in the future, when bookstores are open, I will still do a virtual book launch because people from all over the world actually were able to attend, even people who, if I had done an in-person book event, would not have been able to be there. And I invited a few of my author friends to attend and to ask me some fun interview questions. And we really made it a party atmosphere, a celebration. I shared some behind the scenes info about my book, and I think readers always love to hear those behind the scenes tidbits about how your book came to be.
So you just gave us an absolutely brilliant strategy. And what I'd like to do is really take a deep dive into this. So when you decided to do your virtual book launch, what was your plan? Who did you reach out to? And then how did you coordinate this event? And what platform did you use?
Yes. So what I did, I did some research on some other virtual book launches from other authors. Since my genre is young adult, I was looking at some other young adult authors who, like me, were having their book come out around this time and were scrambling to do something creative. And I found that the ones that seemed to have the biggest attendance were ones that hosted the event on through Facebook. And so what I did was I actually made a Facebook group. Uh, that said virtual book launch for The Best Week That Never Happened. And then when the actual launch occurred, it occurred inside that group as a video. And then I also uploaded that to YouTube. So if someone was not on Facebook, they could still watch it on YouTube. But the fun way of having a group on Facebook was that it really became this community for people to engage with each other as they were reading the book, which I didn't expect. So people would post a picture of their book when they received it in the mail. And my book is set in Hawaii. And so I told people if they could have a fun cocktail or mocktail to take to the virtual book launch. And so people posted photographs of them with their fun drinks. And so it really, I think, helped create that community. So I just invited all of my Facebook friends, and then those friends invited friends of friends. And so we ended up having hundreds of people in the Facebook group and attending the book launch. And I think it definitely got a lot more momentum than if I had just had an in person event somewhere.
And in regards to that, how many book launch events did you do, these virtual book launches?
So that was the main one that I coordinated myself. And then I have since done, let's see, probably about 6 or 7 other virtual events that I've partnered with different bookstores or existing writers groups or book clubs.
And how were those events created?
Those were typically done hosted by a bookstore or a book club, and we've usually used Zoom as a platform for that. So those ones have been a little bit more um, conversational, and the different attendees able to really ask me individual questions. Whereas that big book launch over Facebook, since there were so many attendees, it was more of a kind of a webinar style where I was speaking and people were, listening and they could give comments, but it wasn't quite so face to face. So I think that both are effective. It just kind of depends on which group of audience you're trying to reach.
And were these local stores, or were they national chains of these bookstores that you coordinated these events with?
Yeah, so many of them were local stores that I had originally planned to do in-person events with, but if we're looking at the positive side of something like this pandemic where we are all virtual, right now is that I have had some events with bookstores around the country, who it would be harder for me to fly to them and do an event there. It'd be much more costly, but being able to do an event virtually. So I've just reached out to different bookstores that I found. If I see an author that I really like who's doing a book event, virtually I'll attend it and see if I, can get a sense of the store. And I think just being proactive, and bookstores are looking for authors to host. It's really a win-win. So I think being proactive and reaching out to bookstores has been really fruitful for me.
Now, with these events at the bookstores, so were they sending it to their lists of people and then inviting them to be part of the launch, or was it more of a that you drove the traffic? How did that work?
Yes, so they did. They sent it to their list, posted on their social media and their websites, and then I did the same. So I have a highlighted tab on my website with all of the events that I'm doing, and then I also I like to create specific posts for social media that clearly state the bookstore name and the location where someone can go to attend the event online and when it's happening. And so I share those on social media as well.
Got it. Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
This is such a tough question. And thankfully, with listening to your podcast in the past and knowing this question was coming, I was able to think about it a little bit. I think it's too impossible for me to pick my favorite book as far as a novel. But I would like to share one of my favorite craft books as a writer. It's called The Plot Whisperer, and it's by Martha Alderson. And I used to be a pantser type of writer where I wouldn't necessarily know where my story was going when I started, which is a really fun process, but I sometimes felt like my stories weren't quite as powerful or punchy as they could be. And so I wanted to do a little bit more thinking about the story arc and how I could really plan out my characters and my themes and my scenes for a story. And so this book, The Plot Whisperer, it really teaches you the way to master story structure and make your story the most powerful it can be, whether you're writing fiction or a memoir or even a children's book. You could learn from this book very much.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite writing quote is by, let's see, well, I will say this one by Elizabeth Berg. I met her at a writing conference and I asked her, what is your biggest advice for a young writer like me? And she said, first, please yourself. And at the time, I was a little bit confused by that because I thought, well, there are so many other people I should be thinking about, like editors and readers and publishers. And the more I've written, the more her words really ring true that if you please yourself along the writing journey, if you really take joy in the process of getting from page one to the end of the book, and if you write the book that only you can write and that makes you just really feel alive and vibrant, then I think that's the real victory.
Well, Dallas, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
You can find me at my website, dallaswoodburnauthor.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Dallas Woodburn Author. And I would love to connect with you and say hi, so please reach out.
Dallas, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.